Midday midnight, when the sky over Pompeii went black, it is midday in Pompeii. The sun is high, the heat shimmers on the stone streets, and the city hums with life. On the eve of its destruction, nothing feels unusual. Shoppers push past one another in the forum. Children chase a dog between the ruts of passing carts. In the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, people argue over bread prices, over wine, over politics. Then, without warning, the light changes. A shadow slides across the paving stones. Heads tilt upward. The sun is gone. Above the city, a single towering column erupts from the mountain, a vast stalk of volcanic ash and gas rising into the blue sky, branching at the top like the crown of a pine tree. Pliny the Younger will write about this shape. But right now, the only record is fear. The plume darkens, thickens, climbs tens of kilometers high. Day begins to fold into night. The first stones arrive almost gently, pale pumice tapping on terracotta tiles like sudden hail. Then the bombardment intensifies. Pebbles become fists, fists become rocks. Roofs rattle and groan as millions of fragments hammer the city. Tiles shatter. Rafters crack. The sound is deafening, a constant roar punctuated by screams. In a busy tavern near the crossroads, the room plunges into darkness as the ash cloud spreads overhead. One moment, light on painted walls and wine jugs. The next, a black curtain. Oil lamps flare as the owner shouts for calm. Ash drifts through the doorway, fine and choked, settling on cups and loaves of bread still warm from the oven. People cough, cover their mouths, argue whether to stay inside or run. Across town, in a cramped upper-floor apartment, a family slams wooden shutters against the swirling ash. They push furniture against the door as pumice stones begin to pile up in the street outside, already ankle-deep, then climbing. Every impact sends a dull, terrifying thud through the walls. Dust rains from the ceiling. They wrap cloth around their faces and wait, listening to their city being buried one stone at a time. Down at the harbor, sailors stare in stunned silence. The sea has turned a flat leaden gray under the spreading cloud. Over Vesuvius, the pine tree column billows higher and wider, its trunk flickering with lightning. Ash begins to fall on the decks like black snow. Some crews cast off, trying to row away through drifting cinders. Others stay, watching a mountain tear itself apart. In less than 24 hours, this city will vanish. Thousands of people will be killed, not just by falling ash, but by invisible waves of superheated gas and debris that will race down these slopes faster than a man can run. Their bodies will be contorted, their last moments frozen in time beneath meters of ash. Today, we can walk these streets again. We can see the plaster casts where those bodies once lay, the graffiti on the walls, the carbonized bread in abandoned ovens. Scientists are using scans, lasers, and virtual models to read this lost world like a book. Yet mysteries remain. Who were these people, really? And what did they do in those final, panicked moments when the sky went black? This was an ordinary Roman day that became one of history's most lethal natural disasters. Now, buried in the ash, are clues that may finally reveal what truly happened on the day Pompeii disappeared. What secrets still lie hidden here, waiting to be uncovered before it's too late? Why Pompeii still matters, a time bomb beneath modern Naples, but Pompeii is not just a window into the past. It is a warning written in ash, staring straight at the present. Cut to modern Naples, the Bay of Naples glittering in the sun. Apartment blocks, highways, ports, and packed suburbs spread in every direction, wrapping around the same volcanic giant that killed an entire Roman city in a single day. Nearly 3 million people now live in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. From a distance, the volcano looks quiet, almost peaceful. A green cone, vineyards on its slopes, tourists taking photographs on the rim of its crater. Yet beneath that calm surface, magma still moves. Vesuvius is not an extinct relic. It is one of the most closely watched active volcanoes on Earth. Its last major eruption was in 1944. Allied soldiers filmed fountains of lava and clouds of ash as villages on the slopes burned. That was a small event compared to 79C, but it destroyed homes and killed people all the same. In geological time, 80 years is the blink of an eye. The clock on the next eruption is still ticking. Today, a ring of sensors encircles the mountain. Satellites track tiny changes in its shape. Seismometers listen for tremors deep below. Teams of scientists study volcanic gases that seep from cracks in the rock. They are all asking the same urgent question. When Vesuvius erupts again, what will it do to the modern city that surrounds it? To answer that, we have to go back. Back to the day Pompeii was frozen in time. We want to know exactly what happened in 79C, hour by hour, street by street. How did the ash fall? How did the surges move? And how, in those final terrible moments, did people actually die? Who were these people whose bodies left voids in the hardened ash? What can their houses, their graffiti, their bread still sitting in ovens tell us about the lives they lived on the eve of its destruction? Pompeii is a lost world, but it is also a detailed manual of how a city fails under sudden attack from nature. A small group of modern detectives is trying to read that manual before it crumbles. Volcanologists model the eruption column and pyroclastic flows, using Pliny the Younger's eyewitness account and layers of pumice to reconstruct the sequence of events. Archaeologists map collapsed roofs, broken walls, and abandoned streets to see how the city responded as the disaster unfolded. Forensic anthropologists examine bones and casts, scanning skulls and ribs to understand their last moments, the heat they endured, the positions in which they died. Together, they are racing against more than just the next eruption. Rain eats away at fragile frescoes. Roots split ancient walls. Millions of visitors brush past painted plaster and worn stones every year. Piece by piece, the evidence is disappearing. This city was once sealed by volcanic ash. Now, exposed to the air, it is slowly being erased. If we want answers from this ash-locked time capsule, we have to read it now, before it's too late, because the greatest secrets of Pompeii may vanish just as the mountain begins to stir again. A city on borrowed time, setting up the 79C world. This city did not begin as a ruin. Before it was a warning, Pompeii was a prize. In 79C, it sat on the curve of the Bay of Naples, a busy port plugged into the bloodstream of the Roman Empire. Ships came and went with wine in clay amphorae, with jars of sharp-smelling garum fish sauce, with glass, marble, and silk that had crossed from far-off provinces. Wealthy Romans left the noise and politics of the capital to summer here, in seaside villas where they could bathe, dine, and forget the chaos of the city that ruled the world. Behind it all, like a painted backdrop on a theater stage, rose Mount Vesuvius. Green, gentle, its slopes were patterned with vineyards and orchards. Vesuvius climbed its flanks, taking advantage of deep, fertile volcanic soil that produced grapes so prized they were exported across the empire. Children grew up tracing its outline on the horizon. No one alive had seen it kill. Yet it had. Centuries earlier, a catastrophic eruption had torn this landscape apart. But that disaster belonged to a time before Roman records, buried in myth and half-remembered stories. By the 1st century, the mountain was simply part of the scenery, not a threat. On the eve of its destruction, Pompeii's people believed they lived in a safe, prosperous corner of a vast imperial world. Across the bay, in the naval town of Misenum, a teenager was spending the late summer with his uncle, the fleet commander. His name was Pliny. We know him now as Pliny the Younger, and the letters he would later write about what he saw here are our only surviving eyewitness account of the eruption. He would describe a column of ash like a pine tree, darkness at midday, the sea sucked back from the shore. His words fix the timeline that scientists still use to reconstruct these hours. Looking back, the land itself was whispering warnings. Small tremors rattled walls and sloshed water in fountains. Mineral-rich springs bubbled hotter than usual. Thin plumes of gas seeped from cracks on the mountain, faint fumaroles that today would trigger instruments and alarms. But to the people of Pompeii, these were simply part of life in Campania, no more ominous than a gust of wind. Pattern interrupt, one of those tremors had already left scars. In 62C, a powerful earthquake damaged temples, houses, even the amphitheater. 17 years later, repairs were still underway. Scaffolding clung to facades. Broken walls were patched with cheaper stone. The city was literally rebuilding itself without realizing it was living on borrowed time. This was their normal. Crowded streets, shouted prices in the market, carts grinding over stone. A lost world of noise and color, moments away from being frozen in time. Now, we slow everything down. In the next section, we will walk into Pompeii on that last ordinary morning, hour by hour, and watch what happens before the first ash begins to fall. The last normal morning. Life in Pompeii before the blast. It is the last ordinary morning Pompeii will ever see, and no one knows. The city wakes as it always does on the eve of its destruction. On a single stone street, first light slides over basalt blocks polished by years of cartwheels. Wooden shutters lift with a scrape. A baker's boy heaves open the shop front, the smell of yesterday's carbonized crumbs still in the oven's throat. Inside, the baker is already at work, sliding round loaves into the domed brick oven, stamping each one with a metal seal so customers can prove which bread is theirs. Along the same street, slaves sweep a fine gray dust from thresholds. It is volcanic, but to them it is just another chore. Their brooms hiss over carved stepping stones, past a doorway where election slogans shout from the walls. Vote for Helvius Sabinus, a good man. Next to it, someone has scratched a crude insult about a rival, preserved now as graffiti, a frozen argument in plaster. We move past an open tavern, a thermopolium, where a keeper is chalking prices beside clay jars set into a marble counter. Cheap wine, hot chickpea stew. He leans in to trace the numbers over older layers of writing, a wall menu that will one day guide scientists as they reconstruct diets and daily lives from this lost world. Behind him, a small tremor rattles a row of cups. The sound is brief, like a cart hitting a stone. He pauses, listens. The dog in the doorway lifts its head and barks once toward the mountain. Then the noise fades, and work goes on. In a nearby barracks, a gladiator tightens the leather straps of his greaves. Iron clinks against the stone bench. He checks the edge of his sword, runs a hand over scars that map earlier fights. Who were these people? Whose bodies will one day be found contorted in ash? For now, he is only thinking about the next bout, the next roar of the crowd in the amphitheater. Across the city, in a spacious house cooled by an inner garden, a wealthy matron stands in her atrium. Sunlight drops through the roof opening, glittering in the shallow pool that catches rain. She directs slaves to polish bronze, to lay out jewelry, to prepare an offering at the household shrine. Painted frescoes of gods, lovers, and even explicit brothel scenes glow on the walls. Everyday art that will be sealed under meters of ash and pumice. Children race around a street fountain, chasing a dog that snaps at the water. Their bare feet slap the stones, dodging cart ruts that once told archaeologists the pattern of one-way traffic. They shout insults copied from the walls, not understanding them, just enjoying the sound. In the forum, a merchant glances up. On the horizon, a faint plume rises from Vesuvius, pale against the sky. He frowns, then shrugs. The market is already busy. There is money to be made. We freeze on one instant. A boy runs through a shaft of sunlight between the columns, hair blown back, hand outstretched toward someone just out of frame. This is his last truly normal hour. Within a day, his city will be frozen in time, and his last moments will become part of the greatest archaeological mystery that still remains before it's too late. Warning signs ignored. Could they have seen it coming? The boy disappears into the crowd and the frame widens. Around him, the city is still humming, still confident. Yet beneath the cobbles and painted walls, something has been wrong for years. Pompeii did not wake up to danger for the first time in 79. 17 years earlier, in 62 say, the ground had already turned violent. A powerful earthquake ripped through this region, toppling statues, cracking walls, shattering temples. It killed people in an instant and left a long scar across the Bay of Naples that never fully healed. By the time of the eruption, that scar is still visible. We see houses with fresh mortar lines snaking through older stone, half-rebuilt facades standing beside untouched ruins. In the Forum, temple columns are wrapped in wooden scaffolding, frozen in mid-repair. At the great temple of Jupiter, blocks lie stacked and waiting, as if the builders have just stepped away. They never came back. For the people of this city, instability has become normal. The earth shudders from time to time. Roof tiles rattle. A crack appears in a wall and is patched, then patched again. Life goes on. When tremors are constant, when damage is everywhere, each new sign of danger can feel like just one more inconvenience. How many small warnings can a society absorb before it stops listening? The Romans had no concept of tectonic plates or magma chambers. When the ground moved or the sea retreated, they reached for the language they knew. The gods were angry, or sending a message, or simply changing their minds. Strange animal behavior, springs that ran hot, fumes that seeped from the mountain. These were omens to be interpreted, not data to be measured. Priests sacrificed animals, examined livers, and tried to read the future in blood rather than in stone. Archaeologists walk these streets today and see the evidence everywhere. A wall where old frescoes have been hastily covered by cheaper plaster. A grand house where one wing is newly restored while another still gapes open to the sky. A sanctuary whose columns are propped up, not with precision engineering, but with rough timber braces. This is a lost world living with risk in plain sight, always intending to finish the repairs later. We want to know whether anyone looked at Vesuvius and felt a deeper fear. The mountain had been quiet for centuries. To them, it was simply a backdrop, a landmark, not a threat. Yet in the weeks before the eruption, there may have been more tremors, more strange smells, more restless nights. Did anyone whisper that the gods were warning them again, or had repeated alarms dulled their sense of danger? It is uncomfortably familiar. Today, we live with flood maps pinned to office walls, fire seasons that grow longer each year, climate graphs that rise like a slow, relentless tide. Sirens test at noon. Alerts flash across screens. We normalize the extraordinary until it feels routine. We build, rebuild, and promise to act before it's too late, even as the risks around us quietly grow. On the eve of its destruction, Pompeii is a city in mid-repair and mid-denial. Scaffolding clings to temples, cracks lace the streets, and the volcano looms above like a question no one wants to answer. That morning, did anyone pause in the Forum, glance up at the dark shape of Vesuvius, and feel a flicker of dread? And if they had truly understood what was coming, could they have escaped the volcanic ash in time? Or were the forces already in motion, far beyond anything this city, or ours, could control? Clock starts, 1:00 p.m. The mountain explodes. It is early afternoon. The streets are bright, the air still, when the clock of disaster finally starts to tick. Shortly after midday, around 1:00 p.m., a sound tears across the Bay of Naples. Pliny the Younger, watching from the far shore, will later write of it in a letter that becomes our only surviving eyewitness account. He sees the summit of Vesuvius rip open, and a column of ash and gas shoot upward with terrifying speed. At first, it is a narrow shaft, a dark spear punching into the sky. Then, high above the mountain, it spreads and billows, curling at the edges. Pliny reaches for the only image he knows. It looks, he says, like a pine tree. A tall, straight trunk of volcanic ash rising from the crater, crowned by a vast, spreading canopy that mushrooms outward until it hangs over the whole region. Over Pompeii, daylight begins to dim. The plume climbs tens of kilometers into the atmosphere, a churning fountain of rock, gas, and shattered crystals. From the city, people see its base glowing, the trunk dense and almost solid, while the top unfurls into a black boiling umbrella that slowly drifts, blotting out the sun. Shadows lengthen at the wrong time of day. Color drains from the buildings. It feels, some must think, as if the world itself is being extinguished. Inside the mountain, the process is brutally simple. Magma rich in dissolved gas has been rising for years, trapped beneath a solid cap of older rock. Now, that cap fails. Pressure drops in an instant. The gases inside the melt expand explosively, shredding the magma into pumice and microscopic ash. Superheated water vapor and carbon dioxide drive this mixture upward at hundreds of meters per second, faster than any person, any city can react. In the Forum, people stop mid-step. A merchant freezes with a hand on his scales. Children point at the sky. Some drop to their knees and pray to Jupiter and Venus. Others laugh too loudly, insisting it is only a spectacle, another display from a restless mountain that has slept in living memory. A few, perhaps remembering older stories, feel that flicker of dread become something colder. Then, a pattern interrupt. From the dark canopy above, a fine dust begins to fall. It is almost delicate at first, drifting down like gray snow, settling on hair, on togas, on the painted gods at street corners. People brush it away, smear it between their fingers. It is warm. Moments later, the sound changes. A faint patter becomes a rattle on roof tiles. The first stones arrive, light pumice, porous and pale, bouncing in the streets. Then heavier fragments, harder impacts. What was a distant column on the horizon is turning into a lethal rain, and the people of this lost world are only at the beginning of their last moments. As the fall thickens, roofs and lives will be tested, and the city frozen in time will start to take shape beneath the deepening ash. Rain of stones, the deadly hailstorm of pumice, now the column above Vesuvius, begins to break apart. What rose as a single towering stem of ash and gas starts shedding fragments, like a burning tree dropping its branches across the sky. Driven by a steady wind, that fallout drifts directly over Pompeii. The city is no longer just watching a distant volcanic spectacle. It is standing beneath the main trajectory of the storm. Within minutes, the first phase of the eruption becomes a targeted assault. A volcanic hailstorm focused on this one doomed place. The stones are deceptively light, white and gray, riddled with bubbles where gas once tore through molten rock. They look almost like river sponges turned to stone. Some are the size of peas, some the size of coins, some swell to the size of fists. They slam into tiled roofs with hollow thuds, ricochet off paving stones, and strike bare shoulders and heads hard enough to bruise, to break, to kill. At first, the pumice only dusts the streets, a shifting layer around ankles. But the fall rate is astonishing. Scientists estimate that in these opening hours, ash and pumice are piling up at more than 10 centimeters an hour. In a single human lifetime of minutes, ankle deep becomes shin deep. In less than 2 hours, it is climbing past the knees of those still trying to move. People react in very different ways. Some grab children and valuables and push toward the city gates, heads bowed, arms raised against the impacts. They stumble over fallen stones, over abandoned carts, over bodies already struck down in the open. Others make the opposite choice. They slam doors, bar shutters, and retreat into the dim interiors of houses, trusting thick masonry walls and wooden roofs to shield them from the sky. On the eve of its destruction, Pompeii becomes a patchwork of decisions. A baker's family huddles under an arch in the courtyard, listening to the drum of pumice above. A group of neighbors crowd into a stairwell, convinced the lower floor is safer. Who were these people, weighing their options in these terrifying moments? From outside, the roar of the eruption mixes with the constant rattle of stones. The danger is no longer just impact. It is weight. Pumice may be light in the hand, but it is merciless in quantity. As it accumulates, it loads every flat surface, every roof, every balcony. Within a few hours, archaeologists calculate some roofs are bearing several hundred kilograms per square meter. Wooden beams bend. Clay tiles crack. Invisible stresses race through the fabric of the city frozen in time. Inside one crowded house, that stress finally reaches its limit. There is a sharp report, a splintering, then a sudden roar as a section of roof gives way. Darkness and ash plunge down onto the people beneath. Their screams are cut with choking dust. In that instant, it becomes horribly clear. Staying inside may be as deadly as running, and the worst phase of the eruption has not even begun. Trapped between ash and sea, choices in a dying city, the roof collapses. The house fills with ash, and outside the same choice echoes from doorway to doorway. Stay or run. Neither feels safe. Neither feels survivable. Across the city, people are making that decision in real time. In one narrow street, a family drags a handcart into the open, its wooden wheels already half buried in white pumice. Amphorae of oil, a chest of clothes, a few loaves of bread blackened by falling cinders, all piled on top. The father calls for his elderly mother to climb up. She shakes her head, clutching the doorframe, refusing to leave the house she has lived in for decades. He pulls, she resists, the stones keep falling. Archaeologists have found bodies like these in clusters, at thresholds and in courtyards, their last moments frozen in time. From bones, from jewelry, from the objects scattered around them, scientists build a composite Roman family to stand for many. A father in his 30s, a mother with an infant on her hip, a boy of 10 holding a small bronze lamp. They argue in the dim, choking light. Is it safer to brave the open streets where volcanic debris rains down, or to wait inside and hope the eruption will pass? He listens. Outside, the crash of tiles, the shouts of neighbors, the strange, constant hiss of ash. He looks up at his own ceiling and imagines it coming down, just as the one across the street already has. The pumice is now ankle deep and rising. If they wait much longer, even walking will become impossible. Cut to the harbor. Here, the choice is different, but just as desperate. Boats rock violently in the darkened water, their decks carpeted in ash, oars slipping in the thick, gritty sea. Visibility drops by the minute. Crews cough and wipe their eyes as they try to steer by the faint outline of the shore. Across the bay, at Misenum, Pliny the Elder gives an order that will define his life and his death. He commands the fleet to sail toward the danger, hoping to rescue people trapped along this collapsing coastline. No one in Pompeii has ever seen a volcanic eruption like this. There are no warning sirens, no expert briefings, only rumors shouted over the roar. Some say the worst is over. Others claim the mountain will split open and the sea will boil. In that psychological fog, people cling to what they know. Shopkeepers stay to guard their goods even as pumice piles in their doorways. Parents hesitate, not wanting to drag children into streets that feel like a war zone. We want to know what we would have done, but mysteries remain. At the city gates, the pressure finally converges. Crowds of people and animals jam the arches, carts overturned, sandals lost in the drifting ash. Some push forward into the darkness beyond the walls. Others turn back in panic, convinced that nowhere is safe. The pumice keeps falling. The air grows thicker. And overhead, unseen in the black sky, something far deadlier is beginning to form. Night at noon, suffocation, darkness, and the first deaths. The pumice keeps falling. The air grows thicker. And then, in the middle of the day, Pompeii begins to lose the sun. At first, it is like a storm cloud. Shadows lengthen, colors drain from the streets. People light a few oil lamps to steady their nerves. But the volcanic column above the city is expanding, its ash spreading out like a lid over the Bay of Naples. Within hours, that lid closes. Noon turns to evening. Evening slides into something darker. Pliny the Younger will later write of a cloud like a pine tree spreading across the sky. Down here in the city, people do not see shapes. They feel the darkness. Ash drifts through doorways and courtyards, sifting into mouths and noses. Every breath carries grit. Every word tastes of stone. Inside houses, families shut doors and shutters, trying to seal themselves in. Oil lamps flare and smoke, their tiny flames swallowed by the gray air. Outside, lightning crackles within the plume, sudden white flashes that throw bodies and walls into stark relief, then vanish, leaving people blind again. The city is still there, but it feels already like a lost world. The ash is light at first. Then it thickens. Each fragment is a shard of glass, abrasive, weighty when it piles up. People cough, then choke, lungs fighting to clear the particles. Eyes burn and stream. Children cry that they cannot see. Some tie cloths over their faces, a desperate filter against the storm. Others press wet sponges or tunics to their mouths, as we know from later Roman descriptions of volcanic gas. Above them, roofs begin to fail. Archaeologists have uncovered these first victims. In one modest house, a man lies pinned where the ceiling came down, his skull fractured by a cascade of heavy tiles. In another, a young woman is crushed beside a doorway, her arm still raised as if to shield her head, her bones trapped under a fallen beam. Their last moments are not peaceful. They are sudden, brutal impacts in the dark. In courtyards and porticos, skeletons show ribs snapped by collapsing balconies, spines twisted under the weight of pumice. These bodies tell us that the city is turning against its own people. The very structures that once sheltered lives now kill them, as the ash load climbs to 0.5 meter, then more. It is tempting to imagine that most died here, slowly suffocating as the ash deepened. But scientists now know that, at this stage, many are still alive. They grope through the streets, stumble over unseen obstacles, argue at crossroads. Some decide to stay inside, trusting their walls. Others flee toward the gates or the shoreline, choosing movement over shelter. Who were these people? Making choices in a darkness that feels final. Pompeii in this hour is frozen in time between spectacle and catastrophe. The city has not yet been buried. The real killer has not yet arrived. And when it comes, it will move faster than anyone can run. Phase 2. When the eruption turns unstoppable, but while the people of Pompeii strain their ears in the dark, something else is happening high above them. The great column that has been climbing into the sky for hours is changing. It no longer rises cleanly. It bulges, sags at the base, like a pillar of smoke and stone that has become too heavy for its own height. Scientists now think that by this stage, the eruption column has punched more than 20 kilometers into the atmosphere, loaded with millions of tons of volcanic ash and gas. At first, that column behaved like a fountain. Material shot upward, then drifted down as a rain of pumice. But there is a limit. As more and more ash is blasted out, the lower part of the column thickens. It cools. It slows. Eventually, the base can no longer support the weight above it. The structure begins to fold in on itself, collapsing back toward the volcano that created it. When that happens, the nature of the disaster changes. The eruption stops behaving like a sky-high firework and starts acting like an avalanche machine. Superheated gas, ash, and shattered rock spill over the rim of the crater and pour down the slopes. These are pyroclastic flows and surges. To the people watching from below, they look like boiling clouds racing along the ground. They move fast. Some modern eruptions have sent similar currents surging at more than 100 kilometers an hour. Hotter than an oven. Thick as wet cement with ash and debris. They are dense enough to knock down walls, yet fluid enough to twist around buildings and pour into every open doorway. Anything in their path is surrounded in seconds. The first of these deadly currents do not head toward Pompeii. They swing west and south, toward the coast, toward the smaller town of Herculaneum. Down there, people have fled toward the shoreline, hoping that the open sea will save their lives. Instead, a low, churning wave of darkness drops over the town. It is only a few meters high, but it carries temperatures that can reach 300 degrees Celsius or more. In Herculaneum, bodies will be found later clustered in boat sheds, bones cracked by heat. Their last moments were not slow. They died almost instantly, killed by a blast of thermal shock and choking gas. Back in Pompeii, pumice is still falling. Roofs creak. Streets are clogged waist deep. People cough in the ash-filled air, exhausted but alive. They cannot see the collapsing column. They do not know that just beyond the ridge, a different phase of the eruption has begun, turning a local catastrophe into a regional annihilation. This is the turning point, on the eve of its destruction. The city is still a lost world in progress, not yet fully frozen in time. But now the clock has started counting down. With each new collapse of the column, fresh surges are born. So the question is no longer if they will reach Pompeii, but when. And when they do, they will end the city in minutes. Herculaneum's flash fry, a different kind of death, but while the column is collapsing toward Pompeii, another place is already in the line of fire. Down on the coast, closer to the volcano, lies Herculaneum. A smaller town, wealthy villas, seafront warehouses, narrow streets leading straight to the shore. Here, people have not been buried under meters of pumice. The roofs are still mostly intact. The air is clearer. Yet the ground shudders with each thunderous boom from Vesuvius. Night has fallen. The sky is not dark. Witnesses at a distance later speak of a glowing cloud racing down the mountain. In Herculaneum, people hear it before they truly see it. A deep, rolling roar like an oncoming storm that never breaks into rain. Some residents move toward the beach, seeking boats, open space, any escape from the city. Others shelter in vaulted chambers along the shoreline, crowding into the stone boathouses. They do not know that the first pyroclastic surge is already upon them. A low, ground-hugging wave of volcanic gas, ash, and shattered rock tears down the slope. It is fast, it is dense, and it is unimaginably hot. Temperatures here likely exceed 400 degrees Celsius. This is not heat that burns slowly. This is heat that flash fries. When it hits Herculaneum, the people in those seaside chambers die in an instant. Soft tissue is vaporized. Blood boils. Brains and organs are destroyed in a fraction of a second. There is no time to run, no time to scream, perhaps not even time to draw a final breath. Their last moments are measured not in minutes, but in heartbeats. Centuries later, archaeologists break into these same boathouses. They do not find bodies as at Pompeii, encased by ash voids. They find skeletons, piled in cramped positions, pressed against walls, huddled together on the ground. Jewelry still clasps wrists and ankles. Belts and rings remain where people once stood or knelt. Many of the bones are cracked and exploded by heat, a grim testimony to the temperatures that killed them. Around them, the town is entombed in something different. The surges here deposit a dense, mud-like mixture that flows into streets and rooms, then hardens into rock. Wooden beams are not reduced to empty shadows. They are carbonized in place. Doors, stairs, even beds and cupboards survive as blackened but solid forms. Food is preserved on shelves. Loaves of bread, nuts, fruit. The ordinary details of lives frozen in time inside this coastal lost world. Scientists now study these carbonized remains to answer the same questions we ask at Pompeii. Who were these people? How exactly did they die? What secrets of Roman daily life are locked in this darker, wetter tomb? And how much can we recover before it's too late? Because what happens at Herculaneum is not an isolated tragedy. It is a preview. The same kind of lethal surges that flash-fried this town are still building on the volcano. And as the night wears on, they will not stop at the shoreline. They are turning inexorably toward the ash-choked city that still believes it has survived. When that wave finally reaches Pompeii, what will it leave behind? The final hours. Pompeii's last stand under the ashit is just before dawn. 18 hours have passed since the first stones began to fall, and Pompeii is no longer a bustling town but a buried maze of ash and pumice. The streets are choked. In some alleys, the pumice lies 2, even 3 meters deep, pressed against doorways, swallowing fountains, climbing the fronts of shops, where people once shouted prices across the road. Roof tiles lie scattered like broken shells. Whole rooms have vanished under the weight. Inside the city, the disaster is uneven. One house stands almost untouched, its painted walls still bright behind a curtain of gray dust. Next door, a roof has collapsed inward, crushing beds and bodies together in a single tangle. People cling to the spaces that remain, upper rooms where the drift is lowest, cellars that have not yet filled, stairwells turned into narrow refuges. They are exhausted. Their clothes are stiff with ash, their faces streaked with mud where tears have carved through the dust. Some press damp cloths over their mouths, makeshift masks against the volcanic grit that rasps in every breath. Others wrap children in cloaks and huddle in corners, waiting for the next shock, not knowing that they are on the eve of its destruction. In the half-light, there is still movement. A door that will not open is attacked from the inside, hands scraping, then digging, trying to carve a tunnel through pumice that behaves like solid sand. In another street, a small group climbs over a mound of debris that now reaches the second-story windows, forcing a path toward one of the city gates they can no longer see. Some succeed for a few desperate moments. We can still trace their footprints in the hardened ash outside the walls, a frozen-in-time record of people who thought the worst had passed. But beyond those walls, the ground is already littered with larger blocks, and the air tastes of acid and heat. Above them, Vesuvius has changed. The tall eruption column that once rose like a pillar is no longer stable. It swells, buckles, and then collapses inward, again and again, sending pyroclastic surges racing down the slopes, low, ground-hugging clouds of ash, gas, and shattered rock, moving faster than any person can run. Several of these lethal waves have already swept past the outskirts of Pompeii, close enough to darken the sky and rain hot dust over the city, but not yet close enough to fully engulf it. To the people below, they are glimpses of a mystery they cannot name, a distant roar beyond the curtain of night. Here the pattern interrupts. For a brief interval, the fall of pumice eases. The city is quieter. Scientists studying these layers can see this pause in the deposits, a thin band that marks a deceptive lull. Did some people step outside, believing survival was finally within reach? On the horizon, the answer begins to form. The sky glows an unnatural orange as a new surge builds, larger, hotter, more unstable than the ones before. It rolls outward like a living wall, turning, this time directly toward the doomed city. What will it do to the bodies and lives still trapped inside this lost world, and what traces of their last moments will it leave behind? The killer arrives. Pyroclastic surges hit Pompeii. The glowing wall is no longer distant. It is here. A low roar builds at the edge of the city, like a furnace opening. Then the first major pyroclastic surge slams into Pompeii, not as a towering wave, but as a dense, racing cloud hugging the ground, a rolling gray curtain of ash and gas moving faster than any person can run. Streets that were choked with pumice only moments ago are suddenly swept clean. Roofless houses, half collapsed from the earlier fall, are now open corridors for the surge. It pours through doorways and broken walls, wraps around columns, dives into courtyards. In seconds, the entire lower city is inside a moving fog of volcanic dust and superheated air. To the people still alive, there is almost no time to understand. Scientists estimate temperatures in this first full surge at around 250 to 300 degrees Celsius, possibly higher in the core. That heat does not need flames. It rides on microscopic ash and invisible gas. When a person takes a single breath, that air rushes deep into the lungs, scorching delicate tissue, triggering instant thermal shock. Muscles seize, nerves overload. Consciousness flickers and goes dark. Death here is not the slow suffocation many once imagined. It is sudden, brutal, and largely silent. Bodies are knocked off their feet as the pressure front hits, limbs jerked into defensive postures that will be preserved. In one house, a group trying to shelter under a staircase collapses together. In another, a man in the street drops mid-stride, his final movement frozen in time before he can even raise an arm. The surge races through open squares and down narrow alleys, scouring everything in its path. Fine ash pours into enclosed rooms, cellars, and storerooms, flowing like water around tables and beds. It fills mouths and noses, but for most, the lethal damage was done the instant that superheated air touched their lungs. Within a few heartbeats, the city's remaining lives have been decided. When we look at the casts today, with their twisted fingers and arched backs, we want to know what they felt in their last moments. Were they aware? Were they afraid? The best evidence suggests that consciousness was lost in seconds, that many died before the brain could fully register pain, their bodies locked in postures created by heat and muscle contraction, rather than long struggle. Outside, the roar fades. The first surge passes, leaving Pompeii buried under a thick, hot blanket of ash. Roof lines are reduced to low mounds. Courtyards become shallow basins of gray. The city is now a smoldering shell, a lost world already slipping from view. But Vesuvius is not finished. Additional surges roll over the ruins, hotter and heavier, sealing the ash, packing it down, entombing buildings and bodies alike. In less than a day, an entire Roman city has vanished. Hidden for nearly 1,700 years beneath this layered shroud, its secrets waiting for the moment when the ground will finally be broken again. Buried for centuries, how a city vanishes yet survives the city is gone. But in its place, a new landscape is being built in silence. Surge after surge, the volcanic cloud drops its load. Ash, dust, shattered pumice settle into every gap. First they choke the streets, then they press against doorways, then they pour through broken roofs, filling rooms from floor to ceiling. In some places, the blanket will reach 6, even 7 meters deep, a dense gray sea that slowly levels the entire city. Walls that survived the blast now buckle under the weight. Roof beams snap, floors collapse, staircases shear away. Courtyards disappear as ash slumps inward, erasing the open sky. From above, the outline of Pompeii blurs, its sharp corners softened, its landmarks buried, until only a smooth, undulating plain remains where lives and bodies once moved in the sun. Yet in this destruction, a strange kind of protection begins. As the eruption wanes, the temperature falls. The outer layers of ash cool first, forming a crust that acts like a thermal shield. Beneath it, the inner layers are insulated from rain, wind, and scavengers. What was chaos in those last moments becomes order and preservation, a city frozen in time, not by ice, but by volcanic ash. Inside the houses, the details are sealed. A wooden doorframe, scorched and carbonized, holds its shape like blackened bone. Ceiling beams, turned to charcoal, still rest in their sockets. Amphorae remain stacked in storerooms, one leaning against another exactly as they were left on the eve of its destruction. Loaves of bread sit in ovens. A physician's tools lie in their box. The voids where bodies and furniture once lay are preserved as negative space, delicate hollows that record absence as precisely as presence. Cut down through this layered shroud, and a cross-section of the lost world appears. At one level, a street with stepping stones and deep wheel ruts, entombed in silence. At another, a dining room where wall paintings still glow with reds and golds, the plaster only faintly cracked. Higher up, a collapsed roofline, then nothing but sterile ash. Scientists will later trace these bands like pages in a history book, reading the sequence of destruction in centimeters. Above ground, time moves on. The ash hardens into tufa like soil. Seeds take root. Shrubs, then trees, grow where atriums once stood. Shepherds lead animals across the buried forum without knowing what lies beneath. People in nearby towns remember that a city died here, but not exactly where. Stories turn to legend. Names shift. Mysteries remain. For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii is lost, its exact location forgotten even as travelers speak of a buried city somewhere near Vesuvius. Then, in the 18th century, workmen driving a trench strike something hard. A wall. A painted room. A corridor that leads into darkness. What have they cut into? As their tunnels push forward and the first frescoed faces stare back from the earth, the dead city is about to be disturbed again, and its secrets are not ready to give themselves up easily. Treasure hunters in the ash, the first rediscovery the workmen, think they've hit an old cellar. Maybe a buried farmhouse. They have no idea they've punched through the skin of a lost world. It is the early 18th century. Near Naples, gangs of laborers drive a canal through the fields. Their picks ring on stone, not soil. Painted plaster. Latin letters. Fragments of statues staring up through the dust. The city frozen in time under volcanic ash is stirring, but the people who find it are not scientists. They are diggers, overseers, and kings. Word reaches the Bourbon court, a buried city that might hold marble, bronzes, gold. The king sends engineers not to understand what died here, but to bring out treasure. Tunnels are forced into the compacted ash like mine shafts, blind and narrow. Walls are pierced without plan. Roofs collapse into darkness. They follow color and glitter, not streets. In these cramped passages, torchlight catches a painted garden, a table laid for a meal, a god on a blue background. Work stops only long enough to hack the scene from the wall. Entire rooms are peeled away, shipped to royal collections in Naples and Madrid. The houses themselves are left gutted, their stories stripped of context. What did this painting face? Who walked past it each day? Those clues are thrown aside with the rubble. Sometimes, the picks strike something else. Bones, skulls, a hand curled against a doorway. But in this age, the bodies are an inconvenience. Skeletons are pushed into side pits or broken apart as the tunnels advance. No one is asking who were these people, or how they died in their last moments. The focus is on statues, silver, and inscriptions that flatter power. For decades, this is how Pompeii and nearby Herculaneum are treated, as underground art galleries. It took just 18 hours to bury the city under millions of tons of ash and pumice, but it will take nearly a century before anyone realizes that the real treasure is the city itself. Then, in the 19th century, a pattern interrupts. A new generation begins to slow down. Plans are drawn. Streets are traced on paper. Instead of random tunnels, broad trenches open entire houses to the sky. Courtyards, fountains, staircases, even wheel ruts emerge in sequence, showing a living city on the eve of its destruction. Archaeologists start to see neighborhoods, not just objects. They map bakeries with their carbonized loaves, taverns with counters still stained, gardens with root cavities where trees once stood. Mysteries remain, but for the first time, they understand that this is a complete urban organism, preserved house by house. And then one observer notices something that others have stepped over for years. In the hardened ash, there are hollow spaces shaped like bodies. Voids where flesh once was. If those empty forms could be filled, what might they reveal about the people who died here? The answer will change how we see Pompeii's dead forever. From voids to faces, the invention of the plaster casts the voids look like absence, like nothing at all. But in Pompeii, even nothing can hold a secret. In the 1860s, an Italian archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli walks through the hardened ash with a different kind of attention. Others have prized statues, mosaics, treasure. He studies the negative spaces. In the compacted volcanic layers, he sees smooth cavities, shaped like bodies, with scattered bone fragments lying at the bottom like residue from vanished lives. He realizes these are not random gaps, they are molds. These hollows were once filled with flesh. People had fallen here as the ash rained down, buried while the city was still on the eve of its destruction. Their bodies heated, their muscles contorted, and then, over years, their soft tissue decomposed, leaving a perfect negative of their last moments sealed inside the ash that killed them. Fiorelli has an insight that will change the study of this lost world. If these cavities are molds, then the bodies can be brought back, not as skeletons scattered in the ground, but as three-dimensional forms frozen in time. But how do you fill a human-shaped void without destroying it? How do you touch the dead without breaking them? He develops a careful, almost surgical technique. First, workers expose just enough of a cavity to map its outline. Then, they drill small, precise holes into the top of the void, taking care not to shatter the fragile walls of ash. Through those openings, they slowly pour liquid plaster, thin enough to flow into every fold, every hollow, every outstretched hand. The process is agonizingly slow. The plaster must creep along the invisible contours of a body that is no longer there. Once it hardens, the team begins to chip away the surrounding ash, grain by grain. A shape emerges, a shoulder, a bent knee, fingers clenched together. Finally, a face. The result is unlike anything archaeology has seen. Life-sized plaster bodies appear, caught in their last moments. A mother curling around a child. A man thrown backward, arms raised against a wave of ash he never saw. A dog, twisted in its collar, jaws open. You can see folds of clothing, belts, even the imprint of sandals. You can read expressions of terror, resignation, or perhaps a final, reflexive breath. For the first time, the anonymous dead of Pompeii become individuals. We are no longer looking at distant Roman remains. We are meeting people. We want to know, who were these people? What did they fear? What did they hope for before the sky turned black? These casts become more than haunting sculptures. They are scientific data, preserving body positions, ages, even hints of health that modern scientists can probe with X-rays and CT scans. Yet they are also powerful symbols, confronting us with a city stopped mid-heartbeat. As technology advances, new tools will peer inside these plaster bodies again, searching for answers while there is still time. Because even here, mysteries remain. Reading the ash. How archaeology turns ruins into evidence now the camera drops down into the earth itself. A narrow trench cuts through the pale volcanic ash, its walls banded like a layer cake. This is where the city, frozen in time, is slowly peeled open. An archaeologist's trowel scrapes, not digs. Each movement is controlled. Every few centimeters, they stop. They photograph the surface, draw it, log it. Above, below, to the side, every layer is recorded. Because in Pompeii, the position of the ash is as important as the objects buried inside it. Tiny colored flags mark where a shard of pottery appears. A metal tag is placed beside a bronze coin. A GPS rod hovers overhead, capturing their exact coordinates. Every find is mapped in 3 dimensions so that when it is lifted out, its context, its relationship to the room, to the street, to other people's lives, is never lost. In one house, the walls are the next layer of evidence. Faded reds and deep blues emerge from dust as conservators clean the plaster. A garden scene, a mythological hero, a tray of fruit. These wall paintings are not just art, they are data, revealing taste, wealth, even the stories the people of this lost world wanted around them. Between the paintings there is writing, scratched into plaster, scribbled in charcoal. Election slogans, price lists, crude insults, love notes. Scientists catalog each line of graffiti, matching it to doorways and street corners, building a map of social relationships, who supported which politician, who owed money, who boasted, who begged. On the floors, the small things wait. Cooking pots still blackened by fire. Oil lamps dropped in corridors. Tools stacked in storerooms. By plotting where each object lay, archaeologists reconstruct daily routines, where food was prepared, how light reached a room at night, where a craftsman stood when he worked, on the eve of its destruction. Some discoveries are still exactly where disaster left them. Carbonized loaves of bread sealed inside bakery ovens, a pot of lentils on a hearth, a set of surgical tools in a room identified as a doctor's house. These in situ finds are like photographs of the last ordinary morning, snapshots of their last moments before the sky turned lethal. And then there are the bodies, bones inside plaster shells that were once dismissed as curiosities. Now each skeleton is measured, scanned, sampled, teeth reveal diet. Joints show strain and possible occupation. Fractures and heat damage hint at how they died. Who were these people, really? A child? A slave? A merchant? A soldier? We have walked the trench, read the walls, opened ovens, and examined bones, but mysteries remain. In the eastern quarter of the city, one cluster of victims lies in a strange, tangled position that has puzzled researchers for decades. Why did they fall like this? What stopped them from escaping? New science is finally beginning to answer those questions, and what it reveals is disturbing. The mystery room, a cluster of bodies frozen together. The answers begin here, in a single room on the edge of the city. We are in a low storeroom near the Herculaneum Gate, once stacked with amphorae of oil and wine. Now it holds something else. A tight knot of plaster bodies, frozen in time, pressed into one corner as if the walls themselves had driven them there. The camera moves closer. An adult lies on his side, arm flung wide toward a doorway that is only a dark gap in the ash. Beside him, a smaller figure curls into his chest, hands locked in the fabric of his tunic. Another adult crouches over a child, spine arched, arms spread in a desperate shield. Their fingers, their faces, the folds of their clothes are captured with startling intimacy. These people did not fall where they slept. They arranged themselves. In their last seconds, they chose positions that still speak of protection, of fear, of hope that the next breath might come. Who were these people, huddled together on the eve of its destruction as the volcanic surge roared through the streets? Archaeologists first uncovered this cluster decades ago and poured plaster into the hollow spaces their bodies left in the hardened ash. But only now are scientists beginning to read the fine details. Italian archaeologist Dr. Alana Rossi leads a team back into this cramped room, moving slowly around the casts, searching for secrets written in lime and dust. She points to faint ridges on a woman's torso, the ghost of a stitched seam. A belt imprint circles a waist. Around one neck, the plaster preserves the negative of a twisted chain. At the wrist of the outstretched arm, a bracelet has left a perfect ring. In a child's clenched hand, there is a small lump where something once was, perhaps a toy, a coin, or a key. The pattern interrupts expectations. This is not a random heap of the dead. One figure wears what looks like heavier, thicker cloth, maybe a cloak. Another shows no trace of jewelry at all. Were they a wealthy couple and their children, with a servant pressed in among them? Or a master trapped with his slaves, social boundaries erased in the instant they died? Dr. Rossi's team photographs every angle, logs every thread impression, every faint mark of sandal straps on ankles. They want to reconstruct their lives as well as their deaths. Were they running from a collapsing roof, driven here by falling pumice? Did they think this storeroom was a safe refuge, a last shelter from the ash and burning air? We want to know not only their last moments, but also how they lived in this lost world. Yet the plaster that reveals their shapes also hides crucial evidence. To move beyond guesswork, to discover age, health, even possible family ties, the team must look past the surface. To solve this mystery, they will have to see inside the casts themselves before it's too late. Inside the plaster, scanning the dead without breaking them, the solution is brutal in its simplicity. They will X-ray the dead. But these are not ordinary bodies. They are shells of plaster, fragile sculptures that are themselves precious artifacts, wrapped around even more fragile bones. Each cast is a container and a relic at the same time, a human-shaped capsule of ash and time. To cut them open would mean destroying the very evidence we want to study. So how do you look inside without breaking them? Modern medicine offers an answer. The same machines that scan living patients are now turned on people who died nearly 2,000 years ago. Scientists carefully lift the casts from the storeroom floor, cradle them in padded frames, and drive them through the modern city to a hospital CT suite. A Roman victim of Vesuvius is wheeled past fluorescent lights and steel doors into a machine designed to peer through flesh. The cast slides into the scanner. The room falls quiet. A ring of sensors whirs to life. X-rays slice through plaster and compacted volcanic ash, capturing hundreds of thin images from head to toe. In minutes, a body that has been frozen in time since the year 79 is reborn as data, as thousands of digital slices that can be rebuilt into a three-dimensional model. On the computer screen, the plaster shell turns transparent, Inside, the skeleton appears in ghostly gray. Ribs, vertebrae, the fine bones of the hands. Teeth shine brighter, dense and white, like a string of tiny stones. In some casts, small bright points reveal metal buckles, nails, even coins that never fell from a clenched fist. An amulet on a chain emerges around a neck that has not moved since its last breath. Now, answers begin to surface. By measuring the growth lines in teeth, scientists can estimate age. The wear on molars hints at diet, at coarse bread and grit from stone-ground flour. Healed fractures in ribs and arms tell of past accidents survived long before the eruption. Thickened areas where tendons grip bone show the strain of physical labor, suggesting people who hauled loads, pushed carts, or rowed boats in the harbor of this lost world. In some, the story is harsher. Collapsed vertebrae speak of heavy burdens carried from childhood. In others, surprisingly healthy joints suggest lives of relative comfort. We want to know, who were these people, and how did the city divide work, privilege, and pain? The scans cannot show their last moments in the surge of ash and gas, but they can illuminate the years that led up to that final day. Among the cluster of 15 casts, one image stops the team. Inside a seemingly ordinary shell, the skull is almost perfectly preserved. Teeth complete, facial bones intact, the delicate arches of the eye sockets uncrushed. This head, sealed on the eve of its destruction, will become the basis for something never before attempted here. A full digital facial reconstruction, bringing one victim of Vesuvius face to face with us once more, before it's too late. Teeth, bones, and secrets, forensic clues from a single skull on the screen. The skull turns slowly in digital space. No plaster, no ash, just bone. In this silent head from a lost world, scientists start to search for a life. They begin with the roof of the skull. The camera pushes in on faint zigzag lines, the cranial sutures where the plates of bone meet. In children, these seams are open. In the very old, they almost vanish. Here, they are partly closed, blurred but still visible. Not a teenager, not an elder. Already, the city's dead are giving up their first secrets. Teeth appear next, rotating into view. Molars, incisors, canines, each one mapped in high resolution. Forensic anthropologists count which teeth have erupted, how far the roots have closed, how much the chewing surfaces have worn down. In the first decades of life, roots are still forming, tips open like tiny funnels. By the late 20s, most are sealed. Here, the roots are fully closed, but the crowns are not yet ground flat by years of bread and grit. They cross-check this with bone fusion in the jaw and base of the skull. Certain joints lock permanently only after about 25. Others rarely fuse before 35. The data points converge. This person did not die as a child, nor as an old citizen who had seen many eruptions pass. The best estimate narrows to a single band of time, somewhere in their late 20s to early 30s, perhaps 27 to 32, when lives in Pompeii were often just reaching their peak. Now the question everyone asks, who were these people, man or woman? The digital model tilts, highlighting the brow ridges, the slope of the forehead, the angle of the jaw. A more prominent brow, a squarer chin, a mastoid process behind the ear that stands out strongly. These all tend to suggest a male. A smoother contour, finer muscle attachments, a narrower jaw, more often point to a female. Here, the features lean one way, and the software runs probabilities. If associated scans include part of the pelvis, the picture sharpens. The wide, flared shape and broader birth canal usually mark a woman, a narrower, more heart-shaped opening, a man. But even now, the narrator reminds us there is always a margin of error. Biology is messy. Mysteries remain. Health and lifestyle are etched into the teeth. Under the enamel, faint horizontal grooves show where growth paused in childhood, signs of fever, hunger, or disease. Cavities cluster in certain molars, evidence of a diet rich in carbohydrates, sweet wines, and sticky bread. Hardened tartar clings to the necks of the teeth, trapping microscopic fragments of grain, herbs, and maybe even volcanic ash inhaled on the eve of its destruction. Along the skull, tiny ridges mark where muscles once anchored. Heavy, rough attachments at the neck and jaw can hint at years of physical labor, lifting, carrying, chewing tough food. Smoother, lighter marks might belong to someone whose days were spent more in comfort than in toil, perhaps inside one of the city's elegant houses rather than in the fields. Piece by piece, decade by decade, this head frozen in time becomes a biography. Before we ever see a face, we already know their age, their probable sex, traces of their hardships and small luxuries. We know how their body grew, what they ate, how they used their strength, and that they died in a single terrible day they never saw coming. But what did this person look like in life, in their last moments, when the sky turned black? That answer lies in the next layer of the digital skull, and what the scientists are about to reveal will change how we see the people of Pompeii forever. From Bay of Naples to lab bench, following the data trail, the answer does not appear in the CT room. It begins here, with a scalpel hovering over plaster and ash. The cast that seems so solid is actually a fragile shell, and inside it, the microscopic traces of a life. Gloved hands move slowly. A scientist marks a tiny square on the cheek, another on a tooth, another near the ribs where the lungs once rose and fell. Each micro sample is no bigger than a grain of sand, a sliver of bone, a dusting of volcanic ash, yet each one is treated like treasure from a lost world. Every fragment is logged, photographed in place, given a code that records its exact position in the body and in the ruined city around it. Nothing is guessed. Everything is written down. A tablet screen fills with numbers and coordinates as if someone were mapping stars, not broken bodies frozen in time. A stray hair in the air, a fingerprint on a tube, could destroy decades of work, so the team moves with ritual precision. We want to know who were these people, but to even ask that question in the lab Contamination must be kept out at all costs. Then the pattern breaks. The room that holds the cast falls silent, and the action shifts to an airport cargo bay. Small insulated containers, no larger than lunchboxes, are loaded into a crate. Inside, the samples travel in a controlled cold chain, kept at low temperature so fragile DNA and chemical signatures are not erased. From Pompeii they go to Naples, then on to Valencia, or to other European centers where specialized instruments wait. In Valencia, a technician opens one of the boxes under a sterile hood. Here, the skull is gone. Only codes and tubes remain. Yet in these tubes, the city and its catastrophe live on. Isotopic analysis begins first, measuring tiny variations of elements like strontium and oxygen in the teeth and bones. These values can reveal where this person grew up, what water they drank, what food they relied on, whether their diet was rich like an elite merchant or sparse like a laborer. Next, another team tries to extract DNA from the densest parts of the tooth. Success is never guaranteed. Heat, moisture, time in the ash, all of it has tried to erase this genetic script. If even a few fragments survive, they can hint at ancestry, at family ties, at how this individual is connected to the wider people of the Roman world. Under a different microscope, thin slices of ash from inside the chest and throat are examined grain by grain. Some particles are sharp, jagged shards of glassy pumice that may have been inhaled in the final seconds. Others are fine dust, fused with traces of soot. Together, they help scientists reconstruct the exact moment the surge hit, how the superheated air moved through the streets, how quickly it killed, and how this person died. Archaeologists supply the context of the room and the objects found beside the body. Geologists model the path of the pyroclastic surge that buried this part of the city. Geneticists and isotopic specialists feed their numbers into shared databases. Radiologists return to the CT scans, aligning internal damage with external clues. From different countries and different disciplines, they are all working on the same human puzzle. Across Europe, the data points look scattered, just lines in spreadsheets and ghostly images on screens. But they are already beginning to converge. In the next stage, those cold numbers and ash grains will come back to Pompeii. And from them, something startlingly intimate will emerge, not just a statistic in a disaster, but a human face, captured on the eve of its destruction, looking back at us before it's too late. Rebuilding a face, the art and science of facial reconstruction, the data comes home to a single room. One specialist, one skull, in a quiet studio far from the ruined city. A facial reconstruction expert opens the 3D file of a Pompeian who died in the eruption. Screens glow in the half-dark. The walls are lined with anatomical charts, Roman portrait busts, mosaics, and close-ups of eyes and mouths from frescoes. The cast that was once just a hollow in volcanic ash now appears as a rotating digital skull, suspended in black. This is where numbers become a person. This is where we want to know, Who were these people? The process begins with the bones themselves. Using the CT data, the specialist digitally copies the best preserved sections of the skull, mirroring intact cheekbones to repair crushed ones, smoothing fractures, rebuilding the jaw where the ash collapsed it. In other labs, the same work can be done in resin or plaster, but here every correction is virtual, every change saved and measured. The goal is simple and impossibly difficult: restore the skull to the shape it had on the eve of its destruction. Only then can the soft tissues return. Across the digital skull, tiny markers appear, like pins on a map. At the temple, on the chin, along the bridge of the nose. These are tissue depth markers, placed at precise anthropological points, based on averages from people of similar sex, age, and Mediterranean ancestry. Each marker is a number in millimeters. Together, they sketch the invisible thickness of muscle, fat, and skin that once wrapped these bones. From here, the face begins to answer back. The nose is inferred from the nasal aperture and the delicate nasal spine. A sharp spine suggests a more projecting bridge. A wider opening hints at broader nostrils. The position of the teeth and the angle of the jaw guide the thickness of the lips, the fullness or tightness of the mouth. The eye sockets fix the size and tilt of the eyes themselves, their depth in the head. The angle of the brows that once shielded them as ash fell. Yet even in this room, mysteries remain. Hairstyle, exact skin tone, freckles, the fine web of wrinkles that recorded a lifetime of expressions. None of these survived. But they are not chosen at random. Roman frescoes and marble portraits from this lost world show favored haircuts, beards, and braids. Ancient DNA from other remains in the Bay of Naples hints at typical pigmentation. Population data narrow the range of possibilities, keeping the face grounded in evidence, not fantasy. Layer by layer, muscles are modeled over bone, then skin over muscle. Pores, scars, a faint asymmetry at the corner of the mouth are added, guided by tiny irregularities in the skull. At last, the specialist assigns eyes, lashes, a neutral expression that might in life have shifted in a heartbeat to fear. The screen fades to black, then the finished face appears. A Pompeian, no longer frozen in time as a contorted body in ash, but alive in 3 dimensions, looking straight at us across 2,000 years. In that steady gaze, we see not just how they died, but how they once lived. And we are left asking what other faces still wait, buried, for their last moments to be revealed. Meeting a Pompeian, giving the anonymous a name and story. The camera holds that gaze. No narration for a beat. Just the face, slowly turning, the light sliding across cheekbones, catching the faint crease at the corner of one eye. Lines at the mouth suggest someone past youth, but not yet old. The nose is slightly off-center, as if broken long ago. One eyebrow arches a little higher than the other. Tiny asymmetries that make this a person, not a template. This is not a mask from a lost world. This is one individual, frozen in time on the eve of its destruction. Scientists read this face and skull the way others read a text. The bone density, the fused growth plates, the worn teeth. They estimate mid-30s, perhaps late 30s. The pelvis, the jawline, the muscle attachments point to a probable male. Though the team is careful, bones do not always match the roles a city assigns. The camera cuts to a scan of leg bones and spine. Subtle thickening where tendons once pulled hard day after day. This was someone who worked with his body. Not a life of pure luxury. Compressed vertebrae hint at loads carried, or long hours standing on hard stone floors. Tiny enamel defects in the teeth show childhood stress, maybe illness or hunger, perhaps far from Pompeii. Chemical traces in the bones reveal diet. More cereals and legumes than meat. Occasional fish from the Bay of Naples, but not the endless feasts of the elite. He ate what most people in this city ate: bread, olives, cheap wine, sometimes whatever scraps of pork or songbird were left on the table. We pull back to where his body was found. A modest room near a service courtyard, not the grand atrium. No marble statues, no elaborate mosaics, just rough plaster walls, a low threshold, a few iron tools, and a small amphora toppled in the ash. Was he a craftsman, sleeping near his work? A household servant, caught between duties? A small time merchant, storing goods in the back of a shop? We want to know, but mysteries remain. The reconstruction dissolves into the cluster of bodies discovered with him. 15 shapes, tangled in the gray. A child curled against an adult. 2 people turned toward each other, arms half raised. Another collapsed by the doorway, as if trying to reach the street. Were these a family, their slaves and a neighbor who ran in at the last moment? Or workers from the same household, huddling where they thought the walls would hold? The camera returns to his face, now superimposed over his original cast. We imagine the room dark at midday, pumice hammering the roof, the air thick with volcanic ash. Did he shout orders or whisper comfort? Did he believe this was just another storm, or did he understand that the mountain that had fed their fields was now going to kill them? The surge is coming, superheated gas already racing down the slope. In the final seconds, in that cramped room, what did he see, hear, decide? The screen lingers on his eyes as the sound of distant thunder grows louder, pulling us toward the next wave of destruction. Beyond one face, what the dead of Pompeii reveal about the living, the thunder of the surge hangs over that single face. But he was not alone. Across the city, hundreds of people met their last moments in streets, courtyards, cellars, and doorways. And now, for the first time, scientists can step back from one man and look at the whole frozen crowd. Pompeii buried by Mount Vesuvius, this city was frozen in time, preserving not just isolated bodies, but an entire population snapshot. More than 1,000 casts and skeletons have now been examined. Age, sex, and even status can be mapped. Children clustered in houses and courtyards. Older people found deeper inside, slower to flee. Women and men mixed together in family groups, yet with a chilling pattern. The very young and the very old are overrepresented. The most vulnerable left behind as the volcanic ash closed in. The bones tell of the lives before they died. Under microscopes and CT scanners, childhood leaves scars. Fine lines in leg bones show growth stunted by periods of hunger. Some skeletons are small, lightly built, their enamel marked by stress, the signatures of malnutrition and disease. Yet others are powerfully formed, with thick, dense bones. In a single room, we see both extremes. A frail teenager with arrested growth beside a robust adult whose strong frame hints at years of good food. Teeth hold different secrets. Heavy wear on molars from stone grit and bread. Tartar layers that trap traces of wine and herbs. Cavities from a carbohydrate-rich diet. Chemical analysis of tooth enamel shows that most people ate mostly grain, olives, and wine, with only occasional meat or fish. This was not a city of endless feasts. It was a place where ordinary people chewed hard bread, day after day, in the shadow of a mountain they did not fear. Labor marks the skeletons like a brand. Spines crushed and worn in porters and slaves who carried amphorae and building stones. Vertebrae fused. Discs collapsed. In some men, one arm is thicker, more muscular, reshaping the bone itself, the sign of repetitive hammering or lifting, perhaps a blacksmith or a mason. In contrast, a few bodies, likely from wealthier houses, show relatively smooth joints, fewer fractures, less spinal wear. Even in death, the difference between those who worked with their hands and those who gave the orders is written in bone. Position and place add another layer. Near the city gates, guards lie where they fell, some still wearing belts and gear. In cramped workrooms, chained individuals are found close to tools and storage jars, bodies contorted by heat and restraints, revealing slavery that did not end when the ash arrived. In elegant villas, whole families died together in reception rooms and bedrooms, surrounded by jewelry, lamps, and strongboxes, clinging to the center of their domestic world as the darkness closed in. This pattern is the true map of the city's hierarchy. Who could run? Who stayed to protect property? Who was never free to move at all? Even on the eve of its destruction, Pompeii remained a stratified, ordered society, and that order persisted as bodies were buried and voids were sealed. Yet for all this detail, mysteries remain. If bones and ash can reveal diet, labor, and status, what else is hidden in the walls and streets of this lost world? In the next step, scientists turn from bodies to buildings, from skeletons to graffiti, to ask a deeper question. Beyond how these people died, can we finally understand how they really lived before it's too late? Walking the frozen city, streets, taverns, and brothels to answer that, the film leaves the bones behind and steps into the streets. Pompeii buried by Mount Vesuvius, This city was frozen in time, preserving not just bodies but an entire urban heartbeat. We can still walk its main arteries. Ahead, a basalt road runs straight between roofless walls, its surface cut by deep grooves where thousands of wooden wheels once bit into stone. Between them, raised stepping stones stand like islands, allowing people to cross when rain and waste turn the street into a filthy stream. On either side, the city presses in. A bakery opens to the pavement, its stone millstone still in place, its oven blackened from years of heat, not from the volcanic ash that finally sealed it. Nearby, a small shrine is set into a corner wall, painted with bright protective spirits. This was a world where religion, business, and traffic shared the same cramped space, where people moved from altar to shopfront in a few steps. Scientists now guide laser scanners along these facades, but the camera ducks into a low doorway. A thermopolium, a Roman street food bar. In the counter, great ceramic jars are sunk into polished stone, exactly where they stood on the eve of its destruction. Residues on their inner walls still carry traces of beans, wine, cheap stews. Above, faded paintings advertise dishes and perhaps prices, the ancient equivalent of a menu board. On the plaster, graffiti cuts through the paint. A name. A boast. A complaint about bad wine. Here, people stood shoulder to shoulder, eating quickly, arguing about politics and gladiators, then stepping back into the noise of the street. Who were these people whose casual remarks now outlive them by nearly 2,000 years? A few blocks away, the mood darkens. Down a narrow side street past another shrine, a small building holds one of Pompeii's most disturbing secrets. This is the city's best-known brothel. Inside, cramped rooms open off a tight corridor, each with a simple masonry bed. Above them, explicit frescoes show sexual acts in stark detail, a painted catalog of services. For some clients, this was entertainment. For the enslaved workers who lived and died here, it was a workplace and a prison. Their names and prices are scratched into the walls. No bodies were found in these tiny cells, but their lives are written in stone. Step back outside, and the city shifts again. A modest upstairs apartment overlooks the same street as a lavish villa. In one doorway, a single dark room with a hearth and a rough floor. In the next, a grand entrance leads to a mosaic of a snarling dog, to painted walls, to a garden open to the sky. Within a few meters, poor and wealthy shared the same sounds, the same dust, the same looming mountain. All of it, from the tavern counters to the brothel beds, was sealed in a single day. This lost world became a vast archive of their last moments. Yet, even here, mysteries remain. How did these spaces sound, smell, feel when they were alive? In the next section, scientists turn to digital models and immersive reconstructions, trying to restore not just the walls of Pompeii, but the living city that once pulsed between them, before it's too late. Graffiti and jokes in the ash, voices from 79C, but to bring that living city back, scientists do not start with grand temples or marble statues. They start with scratches on plaster. On the walls of houses, taverns, even stairwells, the people of Pompeii carved their voices into the city itself. Short lines, rushed thoughts, a lost world of sentences frozen in time by volcanic ash. Some are tender, some cruel, some so direct they could have been written yesterday. In one bedroom, a hand has traced a declaration of desire, naming a lover and swearing eternal loyalty. In another doorway, someone has replied with an insult, attacking that same person's appearance and honor. Around the corner, a line reads, "Marcus loves Julia," while just meters away, another writer boasts that he has conquered many hearts, listing names like trophies. Who were these people, and how seriously did they take these claims? The walls also carry the pulse of local politics. On narrow streets, electoral slogans climb the facades in faded red letters. Citizens urge their neighbors to vote for aediles and duoviri, the city's magistrates. Bakers endorse one candidate, promising honest waits and good bread. Tavern owners back another, appealing to drinkers and workers. Neighborhood groups sign their support as if speaking with a single voice. This is civic life at street level, where every wall becomes a campaign poster. Some inscriptions are almost painfully personal. A drinker complains that the wine here is watered down and not worth the price. A visitor carves a simple statement, "Just I was here," refusing to vanish without a trace. Elsewhere, a line warns that thieves prowl this doorway, capturing a moment of fear in a single sentence. These are not emperors or generals. These are ordinary people, leaving tiny records of their days on the eve of its destruction. For a long time, historians believed that writing in the Roman world belonged mostly to elites. Yet in Pompeii, thousands of graffiti cover houses from poor quarters to grand villas. Different hands, different spellings, different levels of skill. Some lines are carefully spaced and elegant, others tilt and stumble. Letters reversed or misshapen, but still completely readable. The spread of these messages challenges our ideas about who could read and write, suggesting that basic literacy reached far deeper into the population than once thought. Today, scientists photograph and scan these faint scratches under raking light, enhancing every stroke before it flakes away. Each phrase is a fragile bridge back to a specific human voice. Then, abruptly, the record stops. A sentence breaks off mid-word. A new slogan begins and never finishes. The ash fell, the people died, and the conversation of the city was cut short in a single day. We can still hear their last moments in these walls, but only as echoes. What other words were about to be written when the sky went dark? And what secrets of their lives are still hidden under unexcavated plaster? Doctors, diets, and diseases, Health in a doomed city, the echoes in the walls lead us somewhere even more intimate. Not to a shop or a bar, but to a house where pain was confronted head-on. In a quiet side street, archaeologists uncovered the home of a Roman doctor. On a simple table, a rusted arsenal is laid out. Scalpels with slender blades, bronze forceps for gripping torn flesh, probes, hooks, needles, and cupping vessels. These tools are not symbolic. They are worn smooth at the handles, stained by use. Proof that in this city frozen in time, people cut into living bodies, drained blood, and tried to pull disease back from the brink. Scientists can even reconstruct his practice. A room that may have served as a waiting area. Shelves that once held ointments and herbal mixtures. Here, under the shadow of Vesuvius, a man opened abscesses, set broken bones, and perhaps performed eye surgery by lamplight. Who were these people who trusted him with their lives on the eve of its destruction? Just a few doors away, another kind of evidence sits carbonized in the ash. In a bakery oven, entire loaves of bread still hold the imprint of the baker's stamp. In storerooms, figs and olives lie shriveled but recognizable alongside grains and beans. Amphorae once filled with pungent fish sauce cluster by the walls. This is the diet of a lost world, preserved like a pantry sealed overnight. The menu looks abundant. Bread as the staple, fruits and olives for sweetness and oil, salty garum for protein and flavor. But under the microscope, the strengths and weaknesses of that diet appear in the bodies themselves. Teeth from Pompeian skeletons show heavy wear and deep cavities, the price of stone-ground flour and carbohydrate-rich meals. Some jaws are riddled with infection, small invisible agonies carried for years before these people died in minutes. Bone studies add another layer. Many skeletons show solid density in the legs and hips, signs of a physically active population walking hard streets and hauling loads every day. Yet there are also curved spines and pitted joints, classic traces of arthritis grinding into vertebrae and knees. In some bones, tiny lesions hint at chronic infections or nutritional stress, quiet battles fought long before the volcanic cloud arrived. Inside the doctor's house, medicine was never just science. Roman physicians believed in the balance of four humors, and hot and cold, wet and dry. They prescribed herbal remedies from plants like willow and poppy. At the same time, people sought healing at temples and shrines, appealing to gods and healing cults when herbs and scalpels failed. Rational treatment and ritual sacrifice sat side by side, each promising relief from the same relentless pain. Pattern interrupt. These were not healthy marble statues, but fragile, aching bodies. When the surge came, every spine already worn with work, every joint inflamed, every infected tooth, met a new and final trauma. We want to know, how did those already marked by a lifetime of small injuries experience their last moments? When heat, ash, and darkness crashed through the city all at once. Slaves, freedmen, and elites, Inequality under the ash pane was not shared equally in this city. Long before the volcanic ash began to fall, Pompeii was already divided, layer upon layer, into people with power and people who were themselves treated as property. At the base were the enslaved. No legal personhood, no right to choose their work, their partners, or their movements. Above them, freedmen and freed women, former slaves who had been manumitted, now Roman citizens, but marked forever by their past. Higher still, ordinary free citizens, shopkeepers, artisans, small landowners. And at the top, a narrow band of elites, whose names and portraits lined the streets, whose decisions shaped thousands of lives on the eve of its destruction. We see this hierarchy built into the walls. In the grand house of the Faun, corridors narrow into cramped, windowless slave quarters at the back, while vast reception halls open toward the light for the owners and their guests. In the Villa of the Mysteries, elegant frescoes decorate dining rooms that look out to vineyards, but behind them, tiny rooms with simple beds and rough plasters show where the household staff slept between orders. Elsewhere, the lines blur, but never disappear. In modest workshops like the fuller's dyeing and laundry establishments, owners and workers shared the same tight spaces, sleeping above vats of chemicals and steaming cloth. Here, bodies labored side by side, yet the legal gulf between a free apprentice and an enslaved boy was immense. Inscriptions on walls and election notices tell us of freedmen who rose to wealth, sponsoring games, running bars, owning bakeries. Their names appear again and again, proof that even in this lost world, some managed to climb. When the warning signs came, responses likely followed these same lines. The richest citizens could flee early to country estates, with carts, animals, and servants to carry their valuables. Some may have watched the first ash fall from a safe distance. Slaves and the urban poor had fewer choices. Many were bound by duty to stay, to guard houses, to keep businesses open, to obey orders even as the sky darkened. How many hesitated at the doorway, torn between escape and obligation? Archaeology reveals inequality not just in life, but at death. Scientists have found bodies in workshops still at their posts, some chained in place, unable to run when the heat surge arrived. Others lie with tools in hand, in storerooms and cellars. In contrast, some victims wear gold rings, fine bracelets, or delicately worked necklaces, jewelry that marked their status even as it melted against their skin. The locations of these bodies trace invisible boundaries. Groups of well-dressed people in large houses and colonnaded gardens. Clusters of laborers near mills, stables, and kilns. In one room, a child with a simple bronze bangle. In another, a woman with multiple rings, a key, and a purse of coins. Who were these people, and how did they face their last moments when the pyroclastic surge swept through? Yet under the ash, all these ranks collapse. In the casts, a master's hand reaches out in the same rigid arc as a slave's. A wealthy matron and an unnamed porter lie only meters apart, their twisted bodies frozen in time. The social order that ruled every waking hour could not protect anyone from a cloud at 300 degrees. For once, the powerful and the powerless are preserved together, side by side, equal in vulnerability, if not in life. But even here, mysteries remain. As we move deeper into houses and streets, we want to know not just how they died, but how they tried to live and escape before it was too late. A city under threat again. Erosion, tourism, and time, but the city they left behind is under threat again. Not from a glowing cloud this time, but from rain, roots, and people. Long ago, Pompeii was sealed under meters of volcanic ash, a city frozen in time. When excavations peeled that blanket away, the protection went with it. Now cameras move along flaking walls, faded frescoes, and cracked columns. Roofs that once shielded rooms from sun and storm have collapsed, leaving delicate plaster and pigments exposed to every winter downpour and summer heat wave. Water seeps into ancient mortar, then freezes, expands, and bursts it apart. Each season, another corner crumbles. Vegetation invades the ruins. Fig trees push roots into brickwork, prying stones apart grain by grain. Grasses sprout in tiled courtyards, trapping moisture against floors that have already survived one catastrophe. This lost world is being slowly unmade. Not in hours, but in decades. Scientists can measure the damage in millimeters, yet the trend is clear. The more of the city we uncover, the more of it we must somehow defend. At the same time, millions come to walk these streets every year. Footsteps echo where the people of Pompeii once hurried on the eve of its destruction. But constant contact leaves its own scars. Basalt paving stones are polished smooth by shoes. Thresholds are worn into shallow bowls. In narrow rooms, the humidity from breath and bodies condenses on painted walls, feeding salts and mold that push frescoes off their backing. A single touch may lift a flake of color that survived when its owner died in the eruption. Here, there is a constant tension. How do we let people stand inches from their last moments without destroying the evidence of how they lived? How much of this city can be opened, and how much must remain behind barriers or even be buried again? These are not abstract questions. They dictate which houses close on rainy days, which mosaics are covered, which alleys are quietly blocked. In response, Italian authorities and international teams are fighting back, building scaffolds where roofs have failed, injecting mortars into hollow walls, and in some cases deliberately reburying fragile areas beneath clean ash and sand. Advanced 3D scanning records entire blocks in microscopic detail, capturing every crack, every graffito, every tool mark before it is lost. Digital models preserve a second Pompeii, one that can be studied long after the stones themselves have faded. Beyond the fences, other threats close in. Looters tunnel into unexcavated zones searching for statues and jewelry. Illegal construction in the surrounding landscape slices through buried streets and graves, destroying secrets that have not yet been read. What lies under those modern foundations? Which bodies, which clues to who were these people are being erased without a trace. The same ash that once entombed and preserved this city is no longer protecting it. Our window into this world is slowly closing, year by year, stone by stone. To understand their lives and their deaths before it's too late, we must race the decay. And as scientists turn to the volcano itself, they discover that Vesuvius is not a relic of the past, but a danger still very much alive. Unanswered questions, what we still don't know about that day, yet even as Vesuvius still rumbles and this city crumbles, some of the biggest questions remain stubbornly in the dark. Pompeii seems so complete, so perfectly frozen in time, that it is easy to forget how much we still do not know. No one can say exactly how many people died here. The bodies we see, the plaster casts that grip our imagination, are only a fraction. Perhaps 10,000 lived in this city on the eve of its destruction. Perhaps more when we count the farms and villas around it. How many escaped into the countryside? How many collapsed on the roads, killed by ash and toxic gas far from the walls, their remains never found? Large areas of Pompeii are still buried. Whole neighborhoods, gardens, workshops, even possible refuges near the gates lie under meters of volcanic debris. There, the full sequence of events is still hidden. Did roofs fail first in those districts, or did a pyroclastic surge hit them head-on? Did people shelter in cellars or try to flee together in the last moments of the night? Until those streets are uncovered, the story of the eruption is missing entire chapters. Even in the exposed parts of the city, scientists argue over the details of the killing blow. Volcanologists debate the exact temperatures and timings of the surges that swept through Pompeii. Were the gases over 300 degrees, causing instant death? Or did some people live long enough to crawl, to cluster, to hold each other before they died? Archaeologists, studying groups of bodies in houses and courtyards, try to read identities and relationships in their positions, but the answers are rarely certain. Our clearest written source, Pliny the Younger, leaves us with gaps of his own. He watched from across the bay, not inside the ash cloud. He saw the towering column, the darkness, the rain of pumice, but he did not see the people of Pompeii in their streets. He misread some signs, struggled to describe others, and above all he wrote as a Roman elite, not as a terrified citizen choking in the forum. From Pompeii itself, no letter survives, no diary, no last scratched message telling us in their own words what that day felt like. So we are left with ethical questions as well as scientific ones. How far should we go in excavating this lost world? Every trench destroys as it reveals. Some argue we must dig now, before it is too late. Others insist that unexcavated areas are a precious archive, to be kept for future generations with better tools, better imaging, better ways to study fragile bodies without disturbing their rest. Because these are not just data points. They are people. Their lives, their last moments, their contorted bodies demand respect. Where is the line between investigation and intrusion? How do we balance our need to know with the dignity of the dead? Some mysteries remain and may never be solved. The exact death toll, the fate of each family, the thoughts of a child looking up at a black midday sky may be lost forever. Yet other secrets may still yield, not to us, but to technologies not yet invented. In that sense, the investigation of Pompeii is itself a story frozen in time, waiting to be continued by those who come after us. Vesuvius today. Could Pompeii happen again? But the story frozen in time beneath the ash is only half of the truth. Above it, in the present, another story is unfolding on the same volcanic slopes. Cut to modern Vesuvius. Steel masts on the rim. Small white boxes bolted to black rock. Cables running down into control rooms where scientists stare at flickering screens. They are listening to the mountain. Seismographs record every tiny tremor. GPS arrays measure the ground rising or sinking by millimeters. Gas sensors sniff for changes in sulfur and carbon dioxide, the chemical whispers of magma moving beneath people's feet. This is one of the most closely watched volcanoes on Earth. Dozens of monitoring stations ring the crater and the lower slopes. Satellites track it from orbit. Every spike on a graph is checked against decades of data. Because we want to know, if Vesuvius begins to wake, how much time will there be before the next city is buried in ash? Around the volcano, modern Naples and its suburbs spread in every direction. Nearly 3 million lives in the wider area. Inside the most dangerous red zone alone, hundreds of thousands of people live, work, sleep as if in the shadow of a loaded weapon. The plan, on paper, is clear. If warning signs intensify, the government would order a mass evacuation. Buses and trains would be mobilized, highways turned into one-way escape routes, entire districts emptied in a matter of days. But Vesuvius does not read evacuation plans. The eruption of '79 sea-built slowly at first, with hours of pumice fall, then shifted without warning into deadly pyroclastic surges that killed in seconds. Modern models imagine several futures: a smaller, Stromboli-like event, or another explosive eruption that sends burning clouds of gas and debris racing toward the bay. Monitoring has improved beyond anything the Romans could imagine. Yet the speed and unpredictability of these surges still pose immense challenges. In Pompeii, people felt tremors for years. They repaired cracked walls. They swept up fallen tiles. Life went on. The danger became background noise until, on the eve of its destruction, the mountain's true power arrived. Today, we normalize risk in the same way. People build on floodplains, along coasts threatened by storms, in forests that burn each summer. Sirens sound, alerts flash on phones, and then nothing happens, again and again, until one day it does. The lost world under Vesuvius shows us bodies caught in their last moments. They did not know which tremor would be their final warning. If a similar eruption struck now, with far more people in harm's way but far greater knowledge, Would we truly fare better than Pompeii? Or would the same mysteries remain, written this time in glass and concrete instead of ash? Lessons from a frozen city, disaster, memory, and denial. Pompeii, buried by Mount Vesuvius. This city was frozen in time and turned into a mass grave. Yet in that grave, an entire way of life survives. It is both catastrophe and archive, a place where bodies and buildings tell the same story from two sides. Walk its streets and the contradiction is everywhere. A bakery still holds loaves of bread, blackened but intact. A bar's counter still has jars set into the stone. Above them, plaster casts lie where people died, their last moments preserved in ash. This is a lost world and a cemetery at once, a gift we would never have chosen to receive. The young man whose face scientists rebuilt stares back at us from that border. We see his jawline, his eyes, the suggestion of a life that once moved through these alleys. Was he a soldier, proud of his sword, or simply a son trying to reach his family? We want to know who were these people, and in searching his features, we recognize something uncomfortable. His fear could be our fear. In the mystery room, the huddled group tells the same truth without words. Adults curled around children, bodies pressed together against a wall that could not save them. Their gestures are universal. Protection, desperation, hope that the darkness will pass. At Herculaneum and the boathouses, dozens more lie in tight clusters, some clutching bags, some jewelry, some nothing at all. Different cities, different rooms, but the same instinct to hold on to people and to things when the world begins to break. For thousands of years, societies have struggled with what to do after such moments. The Romans raised temples and altars to gods of fire and earth, trying to give shape to forces that killed without warning. Today we build memorials in stone and glass, carve names into walls, light eternal flames. But memory is not fixed. As generations pass, sharp pain softens into legend, then into background noise. Stories are retold, edited, made useful, or quietly forgotten. Pompeii itself proves how easily disaster can be reshaped. For centuries it lay buried. Then it became a curiosity for kings, then a stage set for tourists. Only recently have scientists begun to see it as a warning system as well as a window. Because beneath the frescoes and wine jars is another pattern, the long, dangerous lull before the eruption. Years of tremors, cracks in walls, springs running dry. People noticed, complained in graffiti, repaired their homes, and went back to work. Normal life resumed, right up to the eve of its destruction. That is the real danger, not the volcanic ash, but the human habit of normalizing the abnormal. Today the warnings look different, but the rhythm is the same. Rising temperatures, higher seas, new diseases. We measure them with satellites and graphs instead of temple omens, yet we still argue, still delay, still hope that this surge will stop short of our door. If we listen, Pompeii is not just about the past. It is a rehearsal we have already seen, a script we may be performing again without admitting it. When the ground starts to shake beneath us, will we recognize the pattern? Or will we, like them, only understand the message when the sky finally falls? The answer may lie not in the ruins, but in what modern scientists are racing to uncover before it's too late. The day Pompeii disappeared, what we can finally say so, what, in the end, actually happened here. To answer that, we have to run the day in reverse, from buried ruins back to a city that woke up thinking it would be ordinary. It begins with quiet streets at dawn, bakers sliding loaves into ovens, children crossing worn stones. A Roman town on the eve of its destruction with no idea that the clock had already started. By midday, the light vanishes. A vast column of volcanic ash and pumice punches into the sky, then begins to fall back as a lethal storm. Roofs crack. Tiles crash through rooms. For almost 18 hours, the people of this city stumble through choking darkness as the pumice layer rises, stone by stone, to swallow their doorways. Some die here, crushed when upper floors give way, or trapped and slowly suffocated as ash pours in through every gap. But this is not how most lives end. In the second act of the eruption, the mountain changes gear. Pyroclastic surges. Clouds of gas and ash at more than 250 degrees roar down the slopes and pour over the walls. They move faster than a person can run. In seconds, they fill the streets, flood the courtyards, invade the houses where families still believe they might outlast the night. The bodies tell us what happened next. Limbs curled, hands raised, mouths open. For decades, people imagined long agony. Now scientists measuring bone damage and ash layers see something else. Rapid thermal shock. A blast of heat that killed many almost instantly. Their last moments captured as their muscles seized and then relaxed under the falling ash. Only a minority show signs of earlier injury. Fractures from collapsing beams or slow suffocation during the pumice phase. Around them, the city itself is frozen in time. A loaf of bread still scored for 8 slices. A tavern counter stained by wine. Graffiti on a wall complaining about rent, boasting of lovers, mocking politicians. Crowded lanes where cart ruts prove there was an organized one-way system. Grand villas with marble fountains stand only a few doors from cramped rooms where enslaved people slept on the floor. This lost world is not a marble fantasy. It is a place of luxury and hardship. Rich diets of seafood and songbirds set against evidence of disease, injury, and poverty. Yet the real transformation happens when modern tools meet these remains. CT scans cut through plaster shells to reveal bones, teeth, even stress lines from hard labor. Isotope analysis traces where people grew up, what they ate, how far they moved in life. Facial reconstruction software takes distorted casts and slowly rebuilds cheekbones, noses, expressions. Suddenly, we are not looking at anonymous bodies. We are meeting a teenage girl with anemia, a middle-aged man with worn joints, a young soldier with a sword at his side. We want to know, who were these people? And what choices did they make as the sky fell? In the end, what really happened when Vesuvius buried Pompeii is not just a geological sequence of ash clouds and surges. It is a human story, a city of ordinary lives intersecting with extraordinary forces in a single terrible day. The mystery now is not how they died. It is how much of their world we can still recover, and how much longer this fragile archive will survive before it, too, is lost to time, before the ash falls again. Your window into Pompeii, so we come back to them, to the reconstructed face on the screen, and to that small cluster of bodies huddled together in the ash. A child's arm curled against a parent, a hand reaching for another hand it never quite touched. Each one had a name once. Each one woke up that morning with plans they never finished. In the end, the statistics fade. 17 hours of eruption, millions of tons of volcanic ash, entire districts of a city killed in a single day. What remains are people. A woman who meant to collect her laundry. A tavern keeper counting yesterday's coins. A soldier who thought he had survived the worst, only to be overtaken by a surge he never saw coming. This city was frozen in time on the eve of its destruction, but it does not preserve itself. The walls crack. Frescoes peel. Tourists' footsteps and winter rain grind away the streets. Without constant work, this lost world will vanish not in an instant of fire, but in a slow crumble of neglect. Scientists and conservators race to hold it together. Lasers clean smoke, blackened paintings. 3D scanners capture every stone and doorway before they fall. Satellites watch the slopes of Vesuvius for the next sign of volcanic unrest. We want to know how they lived, who were these people, and what their last moments can still tell us about our own. But there is a pattern we do not always see. Pompeii only survives because people keep looking. Because someone chooses to fund another season of excavation. Because a visitor reads the graffiti on a wall and understands that a voice from 2,000 years ago is still speaking directly to them. If you can, walk these streets yourself one day. Do it gently. Stay on the paths. Do not touch the frescoes that ash and time barely spared. Visit the museums that guard the bodies and the small objects of their lives, from carbonized bread to a child's bronze toy. Support the research projects that are virtually unrolling scrolls and scanning houses before it's too late. And if you cannot travel, the window is still open. Read more. Watch more. Learn how volcanic cities are mapped and monitored today. Seek out the letters of Pliny, the CT scans of the casts, the quiet work of the people trying to keep this place standing against rain, heat, and indifference. Because forgetting is another kind of burial. If no one asks who they were, if no one listens, Pompeii's people disappear a second time, not under ash, but under our silence. Every time we return to their streets in our minds, every time we repeat their story, we brush a little dust away from them again. As the light fades, Vesuvius stands at dusk. a dark shape against a cooling sky. The mountain is quiet. For now. The secrets it revealed have reached us across nearly 2,000 years. What we choose to do with that time and that knowledge is up to us.